Good evening and welcome to Hamden Action Now. I'm Rhonda Caldwell, and I'm so excited to talk to this awesome coalition tonight to explain to us about House Bill 6377. It is the bill about the legalization of cannabis in the state of Connecticut, but this bill is the bill about the equitable legalization of cannabis in Connecticut. And we have a star-studded VIP presentation happening tonight from Representative Porter in the 94th. We have Senator Jorge Cabrera from the 17th Senate District and various other members of the Connecticut Coalition on an equitable legalization of cannabis. So stay tuned, and it's going to be a very awesome talk tonight. And welcome, everybody. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Wow.
Awesome. So, Representative Porter, I'm going to let you have the first word, but I'm going to go around and introduce everybody. So, we have Kebra Smith Bolden from Cana Health, and she's also the CEO of Cure Connecticut, and she's also a practicing nurse out of New Haven, which is amazing, especially with the healthcare workers. We love you. Jason Ortiz, he's also a member of Cure Connecticut and policymaking, and he's also the president of Minority Cannabis Business Association. We also have Senator Jorge Cabrera from the 17th District, which we love. And Representative Robyn Porter, of course, she's family. Just forget it. We all know her. She's in the 94th District. And we have Emily Sabo from the UFCW Local 919. So welcome, everybody. And Representative Porter, we'd love to hear from you first.
Well, thank you, Rhonda. First, I just want to thank you for having us on tonight. As you know, legalization of cannabis is the talk of the town, talk of the state, talk of the nation. It's happening everywhere, right around us and across the states. And Connecticut is in line to fall in suit with what's going on. And we just want to make sure that at the end of the day, as we look at the legalization of adult recreational use, that we are looking through a lens that focuses on equity first, which means that we're not looking to do anything until we make sure that we have an equitable piece of legislation in place where the people that have been harmed the most will be made whole the first. And I just think that's the way to do it, because we know whose communities those are. Those are Black and brown people. We've talked about the war on drugs, but anybody that has heard me speak knows that I refer to it as the war on Black, brown, and poor people. And we're here to rectify that. And we're here to make sure that there is a reckoning. And we don't want this legalization proposal to be looked at through the lens of revenue. And that is basically how it's being looked at. This is not about revenue for us. This is about, and when I say us, I'm talking about Black, brown, and poor people, the folks that have been. This is a reparations bill. This is about undoing what's been done. It's about righting the wrong. And it's about making sure that, you know, this next market that we're about to leap into is equitable and that the playing field is level for real. We don't want any more of the, you know, the fluff stuff and the feel good stuff. And we need some tangible, effective legislation that is going to change the trajectory of lives and provide a pathway to prosperity to people who have been over generation after generation locked into and criminalized over poverty.
Awesome. And, it always boils down to money, doesn't it? I mean, and that is what always money as always, you follow that money every time. And, I'm not really interested in filling Connecticut's budget gap, because really Connecticut shouldn't have a budget gap. Right. And we're not going to have cannabis be the gap filler. Not for the Connecticut state budget. So I fully agree. And we're, with Hamden Action Now and our coalition down here in New Haven County are in full support. And so, Ms. Kebra, can you tell us about Cure Connecticut? Because I have been really researching and all of that, and I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear about it.
Sure. So Connecticut United for Reform and Equity was formed a few years ago just to, be a voice for equity and to make sure that if legalization is done here in the state of Connecticut for adult use cannabis, that people in our communities not only benefit, but our owners in this industry are the ones who see the change and the repair done to the community based on the damage that was done by the war on drugs. And so that was something that was first and foremost in our minds when we started Connecticut United for Reform and Equity. We just did not feel that it was beneficial at all for anyone, actually, because what people don't understand, let's just talk about equity for a second. Equity is people tend to think that equity is some sort of handout. This is something that is given to a group of people because, we feel sorry, like a charity almost. Mm-hmm. When instead it should be looked at as an opportunity to equalize the playing field. There was a beautiful illustration that we were promoting for a while, where it just showed like a person in a wheelchair wanting to watch a baseball game and having to look over the fence and making sure that the fence was lowered so the person in the wheelchair could see it, so the tall people could see it, so everyone would have an opportunity to be able to see this game. And that's exactly what equity is. And moreover, equity is because we deserve it, because this is something that not only have we've been oppressed by the criminalization of cannabis and the effects that it's had on our communities, but it is an opportunity again to repair the damage that was done. And I think if we look at, and I think that should be the spirit with which we look at equity going forward. There should be a spirit of reconciliation. Like, yes. I think that the problem with the legislature right now and the governor's bill and all these other things is that they're not really taking the responsibility of the policies and the laws that were put in place that criminalized and oppressed and tore down communities of color that we now have an opportunity with the legalization of cannabis to correct. And if we come in with that spirit of reconciliation, then I believe that will help drive the laws and policies, that are put in place. Like, who could argue with that? If the government takes responsibility for the wrongs that they've committed to our communities, then you can't argue with the fact that we need to now take those funds to repair those communities.
Right. Isn't it something that the government would now suddenly say, oh, we have a little bit of a budget crisis, so now we're going to legalize it and use the money to deal with our budgetary crisis? I mean, isn't that the most disingenuous thing you've ever heard? And let's not, like you said, to your earlier point, let's not forget the damage that it caused to a whole community of people. And that damage continues to follow them around with criminal records and criminalizing them. And now suddenly it's legal and we're going to take the money and you're all set. No, not acceptable at all. Mm-hmm. Jason Ortiz, oh my goodness, I will never forget your testimony. Your testimony goes down in history. I even have a clip of it. It was 30 minutes. Uh-huh. You held your own, though. You really did.
Yeah, and the legislators, they have taught me a lot. Year after year, I've had to have testimonies because we've had to have this debate over and over and over again. And, as far as the impacts of these policies, I was arrested when I was 16 in the year 2000. I was a resident of Norwich, Connecticut. I was at NFA, Norwich Free Academy. And at 16, they arrested me. They threw me out of school. And they made sure that I didn't have any contact with my friends for 4 months. And so on a first offense. And so that was from November to the end of February. And that was a very enlightening, situation for me. I got to figure out exactly how laws are made and why they're made. And luckily the internet was around. So I got to Google and, do my own research. And I learned about the war on drugs, the school to prison pipeline, right, which is a phrase that we don't talk about as much more recently, but still continues to this day, and selective enforcement. Those three phrases would follow me for the rest of my life, right? And so selective enforcement, just so folks know, is that there are lots of laws on the books that are enforced more heavily in certain communities than others. Drug policies have been more heavily enforced in communities of color than in other communities. And that the data has said that, 1,000 times over. And so I had to be one of those people that when I applied to go to the University of Connecticut, they said, do you have a drug conviction? And I had to check yes, right? And so luckily, because of some of the policy workers, that folks that were activists before I got to college, I was still able to go to UConn. I had to fill out all these other paperwork and all of this, but that small change did change my life and let me go to college. And that was when I got to learn about how to change policies, how to write policies. I graduated, ended up getting more involved in the drug policy movement on the national level. And I got to see that as things were, getting more progressively, people were deciding they wanted to legalize, the way that folks were legalizing was not benefiting Black or brown people. Our needs were not in the picture whatsoever. When Colorado first legalized, there was no equity programs at all. And so we've actually made a tremendous amount of progress since then, as far as a national movement of Black and brown folks getting together and saying, no, this is not going to happen like this on our watch. And now we're seeing progressively every state do more and more and more, right? But it has been an uphill battle. And partly, we were not trained how to write laws and things like that. But luckily, I was able to join the Minority Cannabis Business Association. I am the president now, but I started out the chair of the policy committee with a good friend. Yeah, that's right, Kibra. we got MCBA's got the real champions, man. And so Shalene Title, actually, who was a cannabis commissioner in Massachusetts, was my co-chair. And I joined because when I asked her, so what is the opposite of all these bad bills going around? What bill had been drafted by Black and brown people for Black and brown people? She said there hadn't been one yet. And so I joined MCBA to draft that bill. And so it was literally the weekend after Trump got elected, we had a big meeting where everybody got together to decide exactly what it is that we want. And up to that point, people had said what they want, but not as a unified voice. Have we written it down on a piece of paper in a form of legislation and say, this is what we want, and this is what we're going to fight for, and we're not going to argue with your bad bills anymore. So for me, that autonomy, that support structure of all these Black and brown brilliant people from across the country, I got to see what's happening in Oakland and Texas and Chicago, and now we know better. Right now, we're in 2021. We have better policies that we can put forward. We have champions like Representative Porter and Senator Cabrera that can fight for them. And so there's really no excuse for bad policy anymore. And I got to say that I also served on the discussion group with Kibra, on the governor's discussion group about the equity recommendations. And we were there week after week for months, making recommendations, working through these details, and they have been promptly ignored by what is put into the current policy. So looking forward to diving into the details. I'll just say in closing, we absolutely have the talent, expertise, and experience in our community to do this right. If folks want to ignore us, that's the choice that they're going to make. But to say that the policies don't exist or we just don't know how to do things, that's false. We know how to do it. You can ask Kibra. She can tell you how to get it done. The question is, do we have the political will to do the right thing? And that's the question for all the politicians moving forward.
Awesome. Senator Cabrera, I'm really interested. I had no ideas until I actually started reading it that the actual unions were going to be absolutely involved, which is even more awesome. That would make it even more equitable. So I hope you guys can explain to everybody, including me, on how the UFCW Local 919 factors in.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for doing this, Rhonda. Thank you for inviting me and including us. It's so great to be around such great humans to talk about this really, really important issue. I'm gonna dive in a little bit as what brought the bill and how important it is. Jason's testimony at our committee meeting was fantastic. I have the pleasure and honor through my good friend Robyn Porter on the Labor Committee and our other co-chair, Julie Fishner, and it was a great hearing. We're at a crossroads here. The reality is this is happening all around us in our neighboring states. But I think what's different here is that we have a chance to do it right and to do it justly. And for all the things that we've laid out already, we all, I think, are familiar with the history of the war on drugs, how it disproportionately affected certain communities more than others. And we cannot afford to not get it right. And so it was an honor and a pleasure. And I'm so happy that there was a Representative Porter drafted and took her bill forward, because what we've seen too often is people in power talk to us and we think we're getting somewhere, and then when it's time for action or when the rubber hits the road, things don't turn out the way we thought they would. And that's exactly what happened here in the proposal that was brought forward. So I'm really happy we were able to bring a separate proposal in the Labor Committee, and it long overdue. This is not going to be easy. And I think everyone here acknowledges that and understands that. But we have a real big opportunity to get it right. And I can't think of too many opportunities in politics or in government where we're going to be able to have a say in creating essentially an entirely new market that, from what we've seen and what we've read, is going to take off. And if we don't get in on this, so to speak, before this rocket takes off, we're not going to come. And we're going to be way beyond us, and we're just not going to be able to catch up. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to let Emily explain a little more about neutrality agreements and peace agreements, which is a really important component of this, something I've been involved with my entire 20-year career in the labor movement. But I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation. This is critical. This is really important, and I think we're going to get it right. But we're going to have to organize. We're going to have to speak up, speak out, and I think we'll get.
You're muted, Rhonda.
I think if Emily wants to go, let me just do it.
Sure. So I am with the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 919. So just a little bit about the UFCW. Here in Connecticut, we represent about 7,000 workers. But across the United States, the UFCW International Union currently has over 1 million members, and over 10,000 of those members are cannabis workers. We represent all workers from seed to sale, growers and manufacturers, cultivators, processors, dispensary techs. And we've seen since, I believe, for over a decade now, we've been representing cannabis workers. And wherever cannabis workers are unionized and we have labor peace, cannabis workers are making more. For example, New York cannabis workers are making $18 an hour, which is much more in comparison to non-unionized cannabis workers in other states. So we're here to level the playing field and give workers the chance to decide for themselves without fear of retaliation or losing their job if they want to join a union. So part of HB 6377 has labor peace agreements. So a labor peace agreement gives workers the choice to choose. It gives them a choice to choose if they want to join a union in a neutral environment. The employer steps back and says, hey, I'll let you guys make the decision for yourself. And if the workers want to talk to us, figure out what we do, what we can do for them, they're able to choose for themselves if they want to join a union. Additionally, in Connecticut right now, the cannabis cultivators do not have the right to join a union. So by having labor peace agreements, we give workers the chance, even cultivators who wouldn't in other settings have a chance to organize, the chance to organize. Additionally, labor peace agreements and union contracts play an important role in the reparative justice for workers that have been disproportionately affected by cannabis prohibition in the past. It provides an equal opportunity for all workers. Labor peace agreements give workers the chance. This is, for us, it's about empowering workers. Union contracts guarantee wage increases for all workers, regardless of their gender, their sex, their race, anything. So we really are focused on protecting workers from unfair treatment, possible discrimination, or discipline in the workplace. And I feel lucky to be here today to talk about this with everybody here. I think I met Kibra a couple years ago at our stewards conference, and ever since then, I've been focused on getting out there, talking to cannabis workers, figuring out what their issues are and how we can help them. I think the true thing here is that we really have the chance to get a good industry with family sustaining jobs and really build something good for Connecticut.
Well, I mean, that's my whole point. I mean, why would we even do it? I mean, why would we do it if it's not going to build up the community that it originally tore down? I mean, and then for the nerve, all right, here we go. I'm going to preach. Here we go. The nerve of people to think that that would be acceptable. It's absolutely not. I mean, like, okay, Governor Lamont, I know you hear me, but like he has to understand that there are all sorts of little people below the very wealthy people that live here in Connecticut, and they have been affected by this for generations. And I really want you guys to dig in on the differences between, the governor's proposed legislation and the equitable version. And we don't have to, get too, specific, but I really want the community to hear the differences. I mean, because the bottom line here is cannabis legislation is coming to Connecticut.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And we can decide which way it comes. And the coalition needs to decide, and not the wealthy people who are absolutely disconnected from the community. I'm sorry, whoever wants that. I'm going to try not to preach today. Okay. So just tell me to stop when I get on one of my rants.
Preach along, girl.
Because we tired of preaching, so we're going to rest and let you preach a little bit.
Yeah.
But I can start that. I mean, like, if you want to talk about one of the things that's really interesting to me when it comes to contrast with the governor's bill, HB 6377 creates a jobs pipeline, right? Targeted to those people with adverse criminal history. And for me, that's really important because I did a lot of work with my team and the labor committee with the collateral consequences of a criminal record. And we understood and shared with everyone that we have almost 600 barriers, right, to employment for the justice impacted population when they return. And the first two things that they're mandated to do is to find a job and find housing. And those are the two most difficult things for them to do. So with this pipeline that we're creating, it's a pathway to prosperity. And it's addressing the folks who have not been able to find work, livable, sustainable wages. That's why the labor piece is so important, right? Because we're going to take these folks that have been out of the system as far as working and, collecting an income, and we're going to give them livable, sustainable wages. And, Emily said something really powerful. But when you empower workers, because she wants to empower workers, but I'm thinking, yeah. And when we do that, we empower the economy. And we're putting people to work that can't get jobs normally, right? The Scarlet F will keep you in a cycle that will just have you in and out of prison. Well, what we're establishing in 6377 is a platform for people coming out, trying to re-enter, something that's palatable and actually effective, right? Providing them a way. So at the heart, this is a jobs bill. This is about driving home the fact that when you lift from the bottom, everyone gets elevated. And when and this reentry population is really critical because we're at a time now where we've decreased over half our prison population. Just imagine if half our prison population was working and making sustainable, livable wages. Oh my God, what our economy would look like, right? So this bill is going to be a platform for that, to make sure that we're not just giving them empty promises and selling them pipe dreams, right? And we're going to make the American dream real for the folks that haven't had an opportunity to experience anything but the American nightmare. I think the other thing that's really different about our bill is that we are creating an equity pipeline, and the governor's bill is actually, has some very powerful supporters that are owners in companies like the Russian billionaires, right? Curaleaf. We got a former DE agent, Connecticut farmer, a former Republican lieutenant governor who oversaw the expansion of the Connecticut prison system, Connecticut farmer. And we got big alcohol, Green Thumb Industries. And I have a real problem with that. And I think people that are about equity for real, all of us have a problem with that. Because I sit in the heart of my district where we have people, working class folks. And it's just disgusting to me that every corner, you can find a liquor store everywhere you go, right? But I can't find no fresh fruits and vegetables. And our fear is that if we allow this to go forward as introduced in 888, Senate Bill 888, not only will we have an influx of liquor stores, they'll be joined by these licensed retailers, right? And the governor's bill is really put together what I'll let Jason talk about.
Yeah, come on, Jason, because I see you.
Yeah, it's
All right, ready for this.
Yeah, Jason.
So
And,
you can look at any piece of policy and just ask who gets to go first, right? Who gets to benefit first? And you'll see exactly who helped write those bills and who's going to benefit from that particular piece of policy. And I'll start with the bad and then we'll get to the good. So the bad for the governor's bill, he will have the current medical industry gets to turn over and get a license this summer, July 1st, if they're able to begin sales as soon as they possibly can, hopefully early next year, while all the rest of the recreational market, everybody else that wants to get involved will wait for whatever process comes out. We don't even know exactly what that process will look like, how many licenses will be created, where the money will go. We'll figure all that out later, but the current medical industry gets to go and start making sales immediately. And so for that time, between when there is a new recreational licensing system in place and when the current medical gets to go first, only rich white people will be able to sell cannabis in Connecticut for that time. We don't know how long that time is even going to be. It could be years before we figure this all out. We can take Illinois as a good example where they have some fantastic policy. And the medical industry got to go first. The idea is we'll get everybody else up running as soon as possible. But then two things happened: litigation and COVID. And so COVID obviously is not predictable. However, there are always going to be difficult situations that we have to deal with. But the litigation piece, I want to make very clear that the current industry can use the wealth that they've gained with the particular privilege they've had to sell cannabis while folks like us continue to get arrested to lobby to delay the onset of the recreational market, which is all of their competition. So we're actually creating a situation where this very small market has a financial incentive to delay equity and everybody else coming in, and they can do it through litigation. They can sue the state. They can sue the state for all kinds of things, and they can do it using the money that they're making in the in-between time. There was over $100 million made in revenue, and that's not even sales. That's revenue for the state of Illinois in that time frame, and we still don't have equity up and running in Illinois. So these are situations that are created by a choice in the policy. They didn't have to write the policy that way. They chose to create a white market for the beginning of, let's say, 2 years of this market, where the current folks, most of them who don't even live in Connecticut, will be able to have all the benefits. While even after legalization in the governor's bill, if I were to sell or cultivate cannabis, I could still go to jail. Even a small amount, even 1 gram, if I sell it in the wrong place, will send me to prison. But yet we have these out-of-state corporations, and we have to be very clear that the 4 current growers, 3/4 of them are multi-state operators from out of state. And all of that money from all over the place is going to come to be able to push whatever it is that they want to do. Now, luckily, there's a lot wrong with the governor's bill. The criminal justice aspects are just like completely ridiculous. The way that they decide to break down what is decrimmed based on the number of grams. So it's under 1.5 will be a fine. Between 1.5 ounces and 2.5 ounces will be a higher fine. And then from 2.5 ounces and over is a misdemeanor. And so we're going to have situations where folks are weighing out how much cannabis that currently is in front of them, because they're asking police officers to like eyeball this instead of just decriminalizing all of it, right? Under, say, a pound. There's lots of ways that we could have made this more simple, but they didn't want to make it more simple. They wanted to keep a number of mechanisms of the war on drugs in place and maybe make it a little bit less egregious in how it goes down, but it's still going to have the same impacts. And when you have those very weird legal situations, that's where selective enforcement comes in again. And we're going to see the exact same thing happen. And in Colorado, we did see racial discrimination between arrests after legalization happened. However, luckily, we do have champions like the ones we have on today that put forward a different bill. And I want to share the positives of that bill, because not only is it a jobs bill, but it also addresses housing issues as well. And I think when we're talking about we need jobs and housing, the difference in 6377 is the intent was to be comprehensive, to think about our vulnerable populations, parents, students, folks in public housing, folks that are looking for jobs, and how can we protect them? Right? We have so many conversations about how can we be just less punitive and punish people less, but how can we actually help people, right? How can we actually heal the damage done? And that's where good jobs with justice, right? Like that is something that the unions can help make sure that those jobs are real and they're sustainable and they're doing, the right thing and they're building the right kind of industry and training our people. Because it's not just we want folks to be bud tenders. We want our folks to be master growers and chief financial officers and CEOs and every other part of the supply chain up and down. Because if we have labor-oriented employers too, it is vastly better for everybody in every part of the supply chain and the consumer. But if we are limiting it to this very small population of people, we're doing it and it's going to be less revenue, less jobs, and less benefit for our communities. And then lastly, I'll just say on the community investment piece, right? And so under 6377, we create a grant program that will be able to have many different types of grants depending on the type of entity applying. It could be a municipality, could be a community organization, could be other things that come up as we would like to have happen, and we'll be very targeted with that investment. How, for whatever reason, the governor decided to take the cannabis dollars and just evaporate it into thin air by putting it into the pilot funds. The pilot funds are the rent that the state pays to towns for being on their property. So right now, the state isn't paying their rent, and they haven't been paying their rent for a long time. But for some reason, we think that communities of color and cannabis consumers are going to pay the rent for them. Not only is that wrong morally, but it's not even close to enough money, right? Like it would be a drop in the bucket and it'll disappear. Where we made very clear who we're putting first, so did the governor. He's putting the wealthy corporations that don't even live in this state first, and going to let everybody else wait to figure it out and fight over the crumbs once they've made their millions.
Oh my Lord. So it sounds like Connecticut to me, this great big blue state that we live in, right? I mean, wow. I had no idea that, that gap of time between the time that they're going to just have these out-of-state corporations just come and make their money and just churn it like it's a cash register.
And expand and dominate the market, right? So right now they're already, a certain size. But for example, CT Pharma just expanded from 30,000 square feet to 260,000 square feet of flower. 260,000 square feet of flower because they anticipate dominating the entire market.
They're gonna corner the market.
You call that a monopoly?
That's a monopoly all day.
This bill is going to give the medicinal licensees a forward track, a fast track into the licensing for recreation, for adult use, which means that they're going to have a lock on the medicinal, they're going to have a lock on the recreational, the adult use, and you're going to walk in a shop and you'll be pointed in this direction for medicinal, this directional. And I'm like, no, that is not the way this is going down, especially when we're sitting on 6 licenses right now. Connecticut has a total of 10 licenses, 4 of them already taken. We got 6 sitting in the cut. So I'm imagining, if it was going according to their plan, and it's not, it would be 6 in the hangar, just hanging out, waiting. And once this bill were to pass, where do you think those 6 licenses are going? Because the folks that were at the table with the work development around this, that were there for equity, that look like you and me, the folks right here on this this panel, excluding myself. I wasn't invited to the table, but it's okay. Sometimes you got to set your own table.
That's right.
But it was like, they told them what was needed and it was ignored, and to say that you want equity and you want to right the wrong and you want to level the playing field. I mean, like, you're saying all the right stuff, but I can't believe what you say because I see what you did. I mean, right. It's I see it. I'm reading it. I'm going through it. And this is not equity. A lottery is not equity. That is not the way we're going to deal with the harm that's been done to our communities. And if you want to talk equity, well, you take those 6 licenses you're sitting on and make sure that Black and brown folks get those.
Right.
That's you can start there, but we're definitely not looking to combine medicinal and recreational out the gate. Not saying that that's something that can't happen down the line or down the road, but it's a ways down the road because you got a lot to make up for before we even get there. And then the other thing, Jason, that I wanted to touch on was the Office of Justice Reinvestment and how, that's going to be like the oversight, the checks and balances, right? It's going to provide transparency and accountability. It's going to make sure that equity is really at the core. It's going to make sure that the revenues coming from these sales are going to be equitably distributed. We're not just going to send this money to every municipality in Connecticut and say, do what you want, because we saw what happened in other states when they did that. That money went to the police department. Imagine that. We need money going to the police department to do what? Because you know what I say, we're over policed and underprotected. So we're not going to contribute to that, right? I don't believe that we need more enforcement. We need more resources. So the Office of Justice Reinvestment is going to make sure that these revenues become the resources that's needed to really level the playing field and put us in a position where where people can thrive. I mean, we're living in communities that have been redlined. These ghettos, right? That's what they call them.
Segregated.
Were intentionally and maliciously created, right? And the segregation was on purpose. And I mean, like, you know what? If you want to move out to the suburbs, go. But don't deny me my right to stay where I am and to live comfortably and to live safely and to be able to thrive. It has to be more. It has to be more to it than simply surviving. We have people working 3 and 4 jobs just to make ends meet. That is ridiculous in the world's wealthiest nation, in one of the states that is one of the wealthiest states with the hugest wealth gap and the hugest opportunity gap and resource gap. And when you look straight across the board, who's impacted? Black, brown, and poor people.
If I could just echo Representative Porter, I mean, essentially what we're talking about here is leveling the playing field. And Jason, talked about it, and Representative Porter, and that's what we've been trying to achieve with our bill. The fact is, we've all seen in this pandemic how it's exposed the gaps in investment that we knew were already there. Those of us who've been on the ground and working in the communities that we represent, have been talking about the lack of access to healthcare, the lack of access to good paying jobs, the lack of investment in our schools, the lack of intervention programs for our young people who face all kinds of challenges. And really what this bill does is it levels the playing field. It gives the community and the state an opportunity to allow people to compete on an equal basis. The jobs program part of this is really important. The investment of the tax dollars is really, really important. And we've got to acknowledge that there is a history here in Connecticut where we just don't invest in communities where majority Black and brown people live. And we are reaping the legacy of those public policy decisions at the federal level with criminalization, all the way down to the state and local level where you're talking about restrictive covenants, or you're talking about the way real estate agents would kind of guide folks to certain neighborhoods if they had a certain background. And we cannot allow this moment to get by. And these pieces are really important. That's why the labor peace agreement or the neutrality agreement is so important part of this bill. All the data, bears out that if you have an opportunity to decide for yourself, and that's what this bill calls for, to decide for yourself if you want to join any union to have a collective bargaining agreement, so you have a voice on the job, so you can collectively bargain for wages and benefits. And we all know that people who have that freedom to work under a collective bargaining agreement and join a union have better paying jobs, tend to have better benefits, healthcare, retirement benefits, and have a voice on the job, so that when they are confronted with an employer who's abusive or exploitative or is a bully, someone has their back. Someone is there to speak up for them, and they can have a voice and push back. And this is an industry that's about to take off. There are already, as Jason mentioned, people providing medical in this space already that already have enormous advantages, whether it's in dollars or capital or facilities or already experience and a customer base. It's a huge advantage. And if we're really going to talk about equity in Connecticut, if we're really going to talk about leveling the playing field, we've got to get serious and support this bill and get it over the finish line. It's easy to tell people over and over again, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard, do what you have to do. It's really hard to pick yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't have a boot. And that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to make sure that we give people the tools they need to succeed. Jason said at the top of the conversation, we know that in communities of color that have been ravaged by the war on drugs, where we have talented people with experience, with know-how, with grit, who have strong work ethic, they just need an opportunity. They need that level playing field. They need to have those obstacles removed. And we need to get serious about addressing these historic wrongs And that's what we're hoping to achieve.
And George, you said industry that is about to take off. This industry has already taken off. It's in flight and it's at a very high altitude right now. And just to share some stats with you to kind of put it in proper perspective, jobs in the state licensed cannabis industry, right, rose 32% during the past 12 months. 32%. Now think about it. This industry rose 32%. And now employs over 321,000 full-time, not part-time, only one job needed, full-time workers, right? And this was data compiled by Leafly.com. So imagine that. We're talking about a time when businesses have gone out of business. They're struggling. They'll tell you small businesses, this is going on. People are losing money. We sure enough have lost jobs. We processed over 1 million unemployment claims in this state. So how do you balance that? Talk to us. Check out 6377 because this is the solution to the problem. And you know why this is the real solution? Because the people closest to the problem crafted this. And this is where the solution lies. I mean, the regulated cannabis industry added almost 78,000 new jobs over the past year. Well, I tell you what, we pushing manufacturing because they got 60,000 jobs in the hangar. Cannabis industry just filled 80,000 jobs. And when we were having the public hearing, I don't know if you all remember, but one of my colleagues kept saying, well, do we really want, black and brown people to be working in the cannabis industry? I wouldn't want my kids working in the cannabis. Well, that's your kids. And your kids probably haven't had the kind of harm brought to them that these kids and their parents have. And that's what's really nice about our equity piece, because when we say equity, right, and we talk about an equity applicant, we're talking about the people that have been impacted directly and indirectly. So if I've been to jail for it, I'm an equity applicant. But if I left my children behind, or my mother had to care for them, or whatever the situation is, my sisters and brothers suffered, then they are eligible to be considered for equity applicants as well. So, like all of these things, it's just notable, that this stuff happened during a global pandemic. The cannabis business is thriving. They are making fist over dollar. And the last thing I'll say, so I can give somebody else a chance to talk, because I'm excited about this. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can really get this right, Connecticut. 31 states kept their dispensaries open. You know why? They said they were essential.
They're essential. Didn't you know that was essential?
Well, wait a minute. But federally, cannabis is illegal, but it's needed. So it's illegal federally, but it's needed. So we're gonna keep them open. And guess what? The industries that made all the money during the pandemic: the alcohol industry, green thumb industry, and the cannabis industry. And now we're gonna put them together and lock black and brown people and poor people out? Not on my watch. And I'm a rest here.
I'm sorry, Emily. I saw your hand.
This is an awesome conversation that definitely needs to be had. And while we're talking about education, I just want to talk about something else that the UFCW has that I'm so passionate about, is that the UFCW doesn't just invest in its members, it invests in their members' families. So we have a free bachelor's degree college education program. Any UFCW member can get a free college education, a bachelor's degree. They can get 10 bachelor's degrees, and so can all of their families. So we invest in the future of our Connecticut members, our Connecticut member families, and it's really important that the value of this is huge. As someone, both of my parents are UFCW members, and I benefited from the free education, the free bachelor's degree program. My sister benefited from the free education program, and we're going to continue to make Connecticut families and Connecticut jobs better.
Wow. I didn't know that because there's a whole host of folks out there with student loans, and they need to know about that. That if you become a member of the UFCW, you get a free education.
Yeah, and we're also, with our large cannabis member base now, we're also working on apprenticeship programs, and that's another good benefit of HB 6377 because it also includes the project labor agreements, which means that the building trades, really from shovel to sale, will all be union members. So that's also a big plus.
That's totally. See, these are all things that community, because everybody's just thinking about, oh, this is just, going to be this little thing. This is going to be a very, very large and lucrative business that's going to come to Connecticut. And as with every other business, corporate America will take it over if you let it. They definitely will. Keep her up, please. I see your hand too. I see.
So my hand was in my head. I
saw the hand in your head going up.
But I just wanted to say, I was thinking back about the hearing, and that one representative that kept talking throughout the hearing was just speaking, and it just seemed like he was focused on people consuming cannabis and not looking at the different areas in which people are able to expand and learn and grow and really create an industry in cannabis, and not just looking at the consumption of it, but the science behind it and the research and the development and learning about horticulture and learning about chemistry and how the cannabinoids work in the body and all of those different things. Like, there's so many elements that this industry creates. And again, by this industry being deemed essential, it just really points out the fact that, these jobs are not only, and these careers are not only safe, but they're secure because they're needed, they're essential. And so it's just really important that our communities are able to benefit from this.
I totally agree. They will love to, and if we don't see, this is what I'm saying. This is what we try to tell everybody. When you see a flyer about supporting, coming out, writing a public comment, signing up for the public comment, like and share. Like and share. CJ from Black and Brown United, we say that all the time because because if you don't get people showing up and force to these things, then they'll just go ahead and pass it because they'll say, oh, there's no interest. There is interest, and this is just it. I mean, I'm floored because I you can read the bill, but you can't really understand really how huge of impact economically it's going to have on the Black and brown community and how it's completely exempt from the governor's proposed legislation. So, I mean, thank you all for your work in this and also educating the community, because like you said, everybody's thinking, oh, this is just going to be this little thing. No, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar industry coming to Connecticut.
Billion.
I'm sorry.
UConn, because Key was talking about the educational piece of this, and Emily's talking about the educational piece of this, and I'm gonna let Jason take off with it. Because he showed me the video. I mean, like, there were things going on that I wasn't even aware of as a lawmaker in the state of Connecticut. And the fact that UConn has a program and what they're doing, and that they're a part of our equity study so that we can make sure that the data that's being driven is legit, right? It's not skewed. This is being put together in a way that is transparent, and we're holding everyone accountable, because at the center of this, and we'll say it over and over and over and over again, at the center, at the forefront is equity. And that is what matters. So, Jason, if you could just talk a little bit about, what you were sharing with me around UConn and how they have been at this and how they're going to play an intimate part in HB 6377.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best parts of HB 6377 is all the different groups it brings to the table. And I'll start with UConn. And so the University of Connecticut has a cultivation class right now. The University of Connecticut cultivates cannabis right now, and they teach students how to cultivate cannabis right now. And they have been super supportive of the effort to legalize. They did let us go and tour their facility and meet the students. The students that were there tended to be folks that were impacted by the criminal justice system and really wanted to get involved. And then when UConn opened up the first class, 400 students applied for the class immediately, and they had to shut off the applications because it was more applications than the rest of the plant sciences department combined. And so they were only able to get one class. They do one class per semester, but it is always the biggest class that UConn teaches every semester. So there's clearly interest there. But not only that, the expertise that UConn currently has and could have if we unshackled their research potential is infinite. I'm an alumni of the University of Connecticut. I can tell you there's a UConn Law School, the UConn Business School, UConn Chemistry Department. All of these different entities can help lift the equity programs in cooperation with our unions to make sure they're successful entities, right? And so that is what a public university should be for, is to do research, help the people in Connecticut do better at whatever it is that they're choosing to do. And then currently, they want to, they would love to participate and help with us. And so I think there's just an infinite amount of support for supporting our equity programs. And I think with HB 6377, we're even bringing entities to the table that not only left out, but could just have a huge benefit for the program itself and the state. The other big group that we brought to the table in a much bigger way are our tribes, our Native American tribes, Foxwoods, Mohegan, Eastern tribes, all the tribes in the in Connecticut will be able to issue their own rules for whatever they want to do on their land, as they should, and we will respect tribal sovereignty. But we also invite them to join the industry statewide and either help the equity folks, be able to do business with our current dispensaries, be able to be a strong partner in this industry. And we can already tell that the various tribes in the state provide tens, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs already, and they have plenty of capital to help businesses get off the ground. They are more than capable of running a business in the state of Connecticut. And the idea that we would draft policy that would essentially block them from being able to do that is absurd, right? Because like once the governor's bill, if it were to become law, the day that applications are open, I can't necessarily get a license. Even if I had Foxwoods backing me, it's going to put me in some lottery. If I can even get in the lottery, we don't even know how many licenses will exist, while the current growers and the current dispensaries get to turn over automatically. They don't even have to apply. They have to give some paperwork, and then they just get to start. But you're going to tell me Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods and the Foxwoods tribe backing Black and brown communities across the state where you couldn't figure it out? Like, it's an insult that we would leave so many fantastic, brilliant minds, economic powers in the state just completely out of the industry to benefit such a small group of people. And I think one thing is that they underestimate the public on a regular basis. They think we're not paying attention. But in this particular situation, myself, Kibra, lots of folks have been paying attention nationally and doing works nationally. So we know what these folks are trying to do in these other states, and they're just replicating it here. GTI, I'll just put this out specifically, the Green Thumb Industries, which is mostly owned by the Jim Beam family of financing, so you can figure out all the tangled web that they have, literally said in a 2018 corporate report that they seek out oligopolistic markets. Oligopolistics, that's where the rich own and control everything, right? They bought AGL, which was a Connecticut-based cultivator a few years ago. Why do you think they bought it in Connecticut? Probably because we have an oligopolistic market and it's a prime space for them to make that investment, and they're being very flagrant and blatant about it. And so these folks are not hiding their intentions. They're big corporations. They don't deny that they're trying to make lots of money, yet our politicians don't have to just hand it to them so easily. I think with us, and where the Office of Justice reinvestment comes in that Robyn mentioned earlier, is by having a watchdog agency within the state after we legalize that gets to oversee to make sure that any agreements that the government made to invest money happens appropriately, any agreements that the companies made to do community investment happens appropriately, that unions are able to organize and make sure that all workers have what they need, and that everyone in this process is moving towards equity. That should be the whole purpose, undoing the damage done by the war on drugs, because the state of Connecticut, not cannabis consumers, and honestly, not even the cannabis corporations, the state of Connecticut arrested people. The state of Connecticut incarcerated people. The municipal police of Norwich arrested me and ruined my life for that process. It wasn't the cannabis consumers. So it's the state of Connecticut that has to make the decision to actually do what's right and invest in our communities, just like they would if we sued somebody and there was damages, the damages would come back financially. Right? We all know how that goes. You crash into somebody because you were drinking, you're going to pay financially. The state of Connecticut has locked up hundreds of thousands of Black and brown people, even just since I was 16, right? They need to pay financially to undo that damage so we can have a whole society. What we saw this past summer, the reason that our communities are outraged at policing in this state and in this nation is because it's been so blatant and so flagrant that we can't take it anymore. We have to take it into the streets. So to have that happen, and then to have a white market proposal come from my governor immediately after we're in the streets protesting police brutality, where more of this money is probably going to go to police in our communities, is not only an insult to like policy and what we're doing here, it's an insult of like being in communion with other people in my community that just refuse to get it, right? Like I've been at the tables trying to explain it. It's not like they haven't been told how to do it or what the right thing to do is or what we're dealing with on a bigger scale. And so now though, we have to, as a community here in Connecticut, lift up the folks that are doing it right. Because I want to say real quickly also, the status quo isn't going to help us either. We have to end the war on alcohols immediately, right? If it means we have to delay the industry side of it, that's okay. But the decrim and all the criminal justice that needs to come at it needs to happen. And the last piece, and this is usually one that I think goes to the core of what we're talking about, is home grow, right? And so home grow, the right to grow cannabis in your house, we support it and the governor did not. That is at its core not ending the war on drugs, right? If we are not saying, folks, you have the ability to grow what you need to grow in your house. If you want a particular type of medicine, go for it. As long as you're not selling it to other people, you know, it's less regulated. Just do what you got to do for you, right? The idea that we're going to say, no, you can only buy your tomatoes from this one place. If you grow a tomato, you're going to jail. But if you buy your tomatoes from Stop and Shop, that's okay. If you buy your tomatoes from ShopRite, that's not okay, right? Only Stop and Shop is what we're allowed to do. And that's what we're putting into place. Or look at it another way, would have been like the .com era. Can you imagine if it cost you $2.5 million to start a website? If we think we would have had black and brown folks in any part of the .com industry, or we just said you could only start a website if you had a license from the government and they're only giving out 2, right? It's ridiculous that we would.
It is ridiculous.
Like manage an industry that way, where folks that are ready, willing, and able to start a business right now. If me and Kibra had the law available, we would have started a business a long time ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we literally can't. And so it's just outrageous to me that what happened this summer, this is the policy on legalization that we got out of it. Like it's sad, but luckily, because we're cynical and I think we've been down this path many times before, we didn't just wait around and accept what they wanted to give us. We made a better bill. That's a better bill than we see anywhere in the state. And we now have an opportunity to back it, but we need elected officials, community leaders, municipal leaders to say, we want legalization. We all do want legalization.
Right.
This is the better way to do it. And I'll say it's going to generate more revenue, create more jobs, and empower more entrepreneurs than any other bill that's been put forward in Connecticut.
Well, I mean, I don't see, there's no other way to proceed. I mean, I just don't even get it. It's, and then to have, like, I'm back to the nerve of people to think that we're going to just be like, oh, is that what's going to happen? We're going to allow corporate America to come in and take over a whole industry, and we're going to continue to criminalize local citizens, Connecticut residents for growing it in their house because you got to go across the street and buy from some corporation that's tied to Illinois. Come on, people. Like that's basically it in a nutshell. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And
we're going to continue to throw people in jail behind it. I mean.
And I think that's why the mindset behind this legislation is so important, because if you're just legalizing to make money and that's just and fill some, financial gaps, then of course this would be appropriate, this bill. But the reality is that we should be legalizing for adult use in this state, because criminalizing this plant was wrong. It caused harm to communities of color, specific communities. And so we're doing this now to repair it. And if that is the mindset and the spirit behind legalization, that'll change the way in which we're thinking about going forward. So it's not all about the money. It is all about the community reinvestment. It is all about creating opportunities and equalizing the playing field. And so, until we really get behind the spirit of what, this legalization bill should be, I think we're always going to miss the mark. Unless we're supporting HB 6377. If we're supporting the governor's bill, we're supporting capitalism only, just making money, just creating corporate entities. But if we're supporting 6377, we're supporting the fact that this is a way to repair the wrongs by criminalization that should have never been, by oppression and policing that should have never happened in our communities.
Oh, it's amazing. I'm so excited. So what does the community need to do at this point? I know the public hearings are over. Are there anything else that the community needs to do, that they need to call somebody or write a letter? What else can we do?
Yeah. I got
March.
a laundry
We need to
list.
take it to the streets.
I got a long list. So, I mean, first they should make sure they're following CureCT on Facebook or curect.nationbuilder.com for news and updates and other information. But the real thing is we need 76 votes to pass this in the House. So we need 76 co-sponsors in the House to co-sponsor HB 6377 so that we can get it passed. Now, how we get to those number of votes, right? We have lots of things that have to happen in between. So we got to find out if your particular reps support. Luckily in Hamden, some of them do. I'd be interested in how Representative D'Agostino feels about HB 6377 as somebody that has been pushing.
Call him.
You should call him and see what he says. I testified in front of Representative D'Agostino. We had many conversations about equity. He is very knowledgeable. He's a smart guy. He knows exactly the details and what it's all about. It's a political choice, right? And figuring out what is actually going to work and whose benefits are going to be put at the forefront. I think besides that, there is also going to be a hearing this Friday in Judiciary on SB 888, which is the governor's bill. We have to be there as well and say that this is not what we're looking for when it comes to legalization, right? And be very clear, firm, and practical as far as what our alternatives are. Because in this particular instance, we actually do have an alternative. Where testifying previously, I didn't have the ability to say support this other bill instead. So we have the opportunity this time. So people should also testify in the judiciary, and specifically when it comes to the judiciary, the criminal justice part of the governor's bill is as outrageous as the rest of it. Right. And so when we talk about expungements, it will not be expunging sales or cultivation. So while we're legalizing some people to sell thousands of pounds of cannabis, we are not going to expunge even a single sales charge on anybody's record, no matter what happened. I got charged when I was 16 with intent to sell to a minor because my friend was 15. So that charge, I had it figured out otherwise because I was, fortunate enough. But that charge would be something that would not be expunged in this situation. And so we have to dig down into the details, but the reality is we can't focus as much energy on the governor's bill. We have to focus it on supporting our vision for a better society. HB 6377 lays out a fantastic vision and pathway for a better society. Does it cover everything? No. So we encourage all representatives, everyone that has a solution to a problem we may have missed, to suggest amendments, to bring it up in their committee. How are they going to fix that particular part? We, on the other hand, as opposed to the governor, are open to having conversations about how to do this better. I have them every single day, and we try to come up with the best policy we can, but I'm not a banker, right? I can't come up with necessarily the best banking policy, but Senator Funfara might be able to come up with a better banking policy, and we're open to those conversations. So encourage all of your elected officials, local as well, co-sponsor, but lead the conversation in some way. Help us push this forward, because there's different constituencies involved, and all of us will benefit. Everyone really will if we do this right as a state, but also all the individual communities will benefit in their own way. And as we can see with all the various unions that could be part of this process, folks that work in our unions come from all different backgrounds, and it will generate all kinds of benefits for the state. So really, we do want to pass legalization, and we have a path to do it. We just, instead of having to be totally against what's happening, spend just as much energy lifting our vision for the future, and then I think we'll get there.
And can I just say, like, a lot of people have said, well, if we could at least get it legal and then we can go back and we can fix these things. And it just doesn't work that way. If we don't get it right from the beginning, if we don't set these guidelines and these policies and this legislation in place from the start, it will be really hard to draw it back and fix it later. And so that's why we're so cautious about just saying, okay, of course, we want to stop the criminalization of people regarding cannabis. We want to create opportunities. Of course, we want that. But if we don't do it right from the start, from the beginning, that's why equity has to be first. That's why, it has to spell out direct benefit to communities, direct benefit to people who are harmed from the beginning, because it just, people who don't, I didn't understand the legislative process years ago. I have come to learn that if we don't do it right in the beginning, it's very hard to fix it later. And so, don't, don't be, I'm hearing a lot of this from the community, like, well, let's just do it. No, but we can't be swayed to just do it if we don't do it right.
Amen.
Yeah. If I could just add, to what's been said already, it's really important for the community's voice to be heard very loud. And, we're all advocates, as Representative Porter and I obviously are in the legislature, and we'll be, fighting and advocating for this. But if you've been impacted in any way by the war on drugs, we want to hear you. Your voice is important. Your story is important. The story Jason shared about this is very important. I'm so happy that he was able to figure things out and go to UConn, get an education, and he's doing a great job with that education that he received and continues to do so. But there are so many people in our communities who don't know their rights, who don't know that they, even though it's difficult, that they also deserve a level playing field. They deserve a second chance. That something that may have happened to them a long time ago when they were young or in the wrong place at the wrong time, that shouldn't define you for your entire life. And that's what really this is about. This is about justice. Do we really believe in justice? And, I really would encourage everyone who's listening today to really, get online, reach out to Emily or to Jason or Brooke, and tell your story and speak up. And that's the way we're going to get this done. The reality is we're up against some pretty entrenched, powerful forces. People with lots of money, lots of connections. But there's one thing I know for sure, is that when the community comes together, nothing can beat people power. And so if you're listening, you're out there, I really encourage you to speak up, speak out, and together we can get this done.
I agree.
I agree, Senator Cabrera.
That's where it's at. At the end of the day, it is about elevating, lifting. And my thing is, women said this a long time ago, during the suffrage movement, and it was Black women. We're going to lift as we climb, and that is what this bill does. It lifts as it climbs, and it doesn't leave anyone behind. And that has been the custom historically in this country. It's been a great divide, and it has been intentional. I mean, as the chair of labor, I just want to drive home, what this is going to look like across the state of Connecticut for a population of over 200,000 people that are currently still unemployed. We're talking, just to put the 2021 job totals in perspective. In the United States, there are more legal cannabis workers than electrical engineers.
How about that?
There are more legal cannabis workers than EMTs and paramedics. There are more than twice as many legal cannabis workers as dentists. Overall, the total number of full-time jobs in the licensed cannabis industry has risen nearly threefold since 2017. It ain't even been 5 years, y'all. And what they're predicting for the state of Connecticut is this industry in 5 years will be $1 billion industry. Do you know how many jobs are associated with $1 billion industry? We talking about workforce development. Well, my God, it's a happening right under our nose. We just got to make sure that the people that get the jobs and get a slice at the pie are actually the people that deserve that and have earned that. And this is the way to make them whole. This is how we do it. And when we talk about equity, we got to remember there are wraparound services associated with that. I mean, Illinois, they had the language right, and as a lawmaker, I can tell you, it's all in the title. No child left behind. Okay. It's all in make it sound good and you can get it passed. Just don't call it what it is. This has been my experience. So when this bill comes out talking about equity, I got my lens focused because I want to see it. I'm from Missouri. I may be living in Connecticut, but I'm going to claim to be from Missouri because I need you to show me. Show it to me. And it's not there. I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. And it's time that we start calling people on their BS, man. There's too much at stake. This pandemic has highlighted and exacerbated what was always already going on. This ain't nothing new for us. This is deja vu. And there should be no way that we are willing to compromise on this. It's complicated. No, having a conscience is not complicated. Doing
the right thing isn't complicated.
Doing what's right is not complicated.
No.
And we can't just keep going with that. We just got to get it done. We got to get it done right. And if we're not going to do it right, guess what? We're not doing it. Because this has never been a war on drugs, people. Hear me when I tell you, it has never been a war on drugs.
On me.
Because white people have been doing drugs with impunity. We are 5 times more likely. Look, we use it at the same rate, but black and brown people, especially black, are 5 times more likely to get arrested. Mm-hmm. I was just reading an article the other day, and I'm sorry that the brother's name escapes me, but this brother is doing a life sentence for pushing cannabis back in the day, for selling weed, a non-violent offense. He didn't commit murder. He didn't hurt nobody. He didn't violate nobody. He was selling weed. And now we got 4 licensees here in the state of Connecticut that don't look like you and me making hand over fist off of cannabis. And we got people sitting in jail serving life sentences, 20 years, 30 years for non-violent offenses. We can't let that happen on our watch. Connecticut talks about being a leader. Well, hello, here's our obligation to lead. It is not opportunity. This is an obligation. We are obligated to get this right.
You know, it always seems to be interesting when there is such a stigma placed on cannabis sales up until it becomes $1 billion industry. Mm-hmm. Then suddenly there's no stigma. And suddenly it's cool to have all the girls go down to the store and pick up some edibles for the bridal party that's coming up. Oh, there's no stigma anymore, right? Oh, but it was a stigma when homie was selling it to make money while he was in school to take care of his bills and things. Oh, that was a stigma. He's a criminal.
And to feed his family, because let's talk about they came into our communities we were thriving. Newhallville was the place to be. This is where Black people came when they moved up and were able to purchase homes and do that thing that we've never been able to do, build generational wealth. This was the Mecca, Newhallville, where we have the highest crime rate, right? Newhallville. We had manufacturing here. And what did they do? They shipped it overseas so that they could pimp people out in third world countries instead of paying the people that are here the wages that would increase revenues and make everyone.
All right. It always boils down to money. I mean, again, don't start me on Newhallville. I mean, because they literally redlined it after they shipped the companies out. They redlined it, took the tax money, and then stifled it of giving them their tax money back and their resources. And now you fast forward 50, 70 years later, they say, oh, y'all are just a bunch of criminals. You don't want to have any better.
Well,
you don't want to do any better.
When you're giving us substandard education, substandard jobs, substandard health care, when everything we're getting ain't worth nothing, what are we supposed to do? Because guess what? If you're living and breathing, you got to eat to stay alive, right?
Exactly.
And if you're depending on master to feed you, guess what? You're also giving master the power to starve you. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And when you criminalize innovation, you know, like some of the people in the hood are the most innovative people I've ever had encountered.
Of course.
You know, so if we're able to take people from the legacy market, I hate calling it the black market or the underground market. It's legacy. Like they have provided medicine to communities for decades, whether legal, illegally, you know, however you want to market it, however you want to say it. But the bottom line is if UFCW is able to now educate those people and bring them into a legal market, and then now, you know, because we don't want to leave these people out in the cold either. You know, and so this is a path to, you know, reconciliation. Again,
it is
to the same thing. This will be a path to be able to take these same people that we've criminalized and now help them become legitimate and to be able to thrive in a brand new industry and create legacy.
And can I also say that this is how white supremacy operates? Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, here I go again. But this is how it operates. Mm-hmm. It takes an opportunity. It uses this one substance to criminalize. Then it decides we're going to make some money off of this now. So we're not going to criminalize it anywhere. And we're going to leave everybody behind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
white supremacy profile.
It's textbook.
This Marijuana Act of, and I'm only using that word because that is what it's for. But for people that really want to be sensitive to culture and, you know, as far as I'm concerned, blasphemy, marijuana is not what we call that. That is very racist. That's just like saying the N word. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the act of 1937. And we had people that decided, right, white folks that were in charge, in power, that had control, that they were going to criminalize Nixon and his crew, right? And they said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to put heroin in the black community, we're going to put marijuana in the hippie community. And these were the two populations that were standing up to him and challenging him on issues that he was falling short on. So how did he shut them up? Criminalize them, put the drugs in the community. Right? That's what they did. Like, let's know what the history of the criminalization around cannabis is and what it's rooted and grounded in. Racism. Okay? And we know this is the mass incarceration and new Jim Crow. Michelle Alexander talks about it very well. And it's time to undo all of that. And
you have to undo all of it.
We look at Colorado. Yeah. When we look at Colorado, I'm thinking about Colorado. And after 5 years, you know, their stats and data is showing that kids are not smoking more. You know, that was one of the concerns, and it was a legitimate concern. But Colorado has actually gathered data that says, you know what, our young people did not. Teens, weed arrests down 20% since it's become legal, right? But blacks are still arrested at double the rate as whites for cannabis offenses. How are you still getting arrested for this if it's been legalized? I'm gonna table it. Right? But the other thing they will say, not just about Colorado, but also about Florida. If you ask them about their legalization of cannabis, they say, oh, you're talking about the cartel? And I mean, the U.S. attorney in Colorado has said that it's made the cartel worse in Colorado, that it's actually doubled the drug black market, increased it. It's an epicenter. So we don't want to see that happen here in Connecticut. We're not setting ourselves up for that, especially after we done got to a point where we decreased the prison population by over half, right? Why would we go back to incarcerating people for nonviolent drug offenses? Why would we do that? It just doesn't make sense. So if we're going to do this, let's do it for real.
This is an educational night. This is an educational night for me.
I'll say quickly before we wrap up here, because this is super important, about the unlicensed operators, right? So for most of my life, I was an unlicensed operator, and including when I was a student at the University of Connecticut. And I met many other unlicensed operators at the University of Connecticut that were rich and white. And there are plenty of those in those communities, how they get their drugs, right? And things much worse than cannabis, of course. It's all different types of things happen at the University of Connecticut. But I think we have to reframe how we talk about drug dealers, and actually in the governor's bill, they have a literal legal definition of dealer, which is its own level of messed up. That we'll have a conversation about that another day. Just look at it. It's in the bill. Literally, the dealer is a definition.
I hope they got big pharma in that.
I'm going to look that up because I want to see what's
right. You know, just control that dealer, and you'll find it. And so, how I refer to them, because those folks are my family and my friends, and we have been perfectly fine, successful citizens in every other facet of our lives, and they are future entrepreneurs. That network of people that we're talking about is our existing community infrastructure. So words matter a lot on how we talk about who these people are. So when we have a bill and we say, how are we going to address our existing entrepreneurs? Right? That's a very different conversation. How are we going to expand our existing community infrastructure? Very different conversation.
That's just the bottom line.
How are we going to empower our latent entrepreneurs that are ready to go? You'll have different policy when you talk about it that way. And I was fortunate enough as president of MCBA that I got to be on the other side of the table when I heard law enforcement and big business come together for a conference in Massachusetts and Boston around the illicit market. Right? And the demonization of folks in the illicit market as if we are trying to harm every single person we interact with, right? And we're stealing their trademarks. And like, it was just wild what they were claiming the illicit market does. Well, of course, I'm sitting in the room, right? And I have to say, This college-educated president of a business association is the person you're demonizing with every single word we've heard here so far. And I've yet to hear anybody talk about how you're going to help me start a business, right? And so when we're talking about how do we address that community, right? You do it by giving them licenses. You do it by helping them start businesses. If you say the licenses are going to be $50, as long as you can go and do your license, you figure out your business plan, you do whatever it is, we'll let you do it. There will be 20,000 new businesses tomorrow. Right. But instead, we're saying, no, you can't. We want to make sure you can't. And that's how the other approach is. So again, how do we address the folks that are currently unlicensed? By giving them a pathway to prosperity. This is how you do it. If you want to flip over to the legal market and start paying taxes, you got to take this class. You got to talk to UFCW. You got to meet with HEBRA. You got to meet with the Small Business Administration. And then at the end, you just got to figure this out. You got your lease here. You can start a business. And not only are we going to let you do it, we want to partner you with other cohorts of people that are also doing the same thing. If you're a grower, let's find you someone who manufactures edibles. In California, in Oakland, they have the Equity Works Incubator that is funded by both the state and the municipality, where equity cohorts can work together and share ideas and be in that space and then use that space as their leased spot, right? So you need to have a location in order to have your business. Well, instead of saying you got to go pay thousands and thousands of dollars a month, why don't we have the state put aside some of the empty spaces that we have right now and say, this is going to be an equity incubator. You can do your project here. It'll be very regulated because now it's, a municipal offering. And again, we have examples of that in Oakland, California. Supernova Women and Amber Center out there. Please do look them up because everything they do out there is so fantastic. They really were the epicenter of the equity movement. They fought the fight that they had in Oakland.
Say it again, Jason. You're talking a little fast. Give them
Women.
Amber. Say it again.
So Amber Center of Supernova Women is an organization in the Bay Area in California. Please do look them up. Everything I learned, everything we built with MCBA was on the basis of everything they started. And so, again, we can call them as a state and say, Amber, how'd you do it? Come help Connecticut, right? Like these folks are reachable, right? And they want to help do the right thing. So there are people out there that we can address. But when we're talking about the big elephant in the room of the unlicensed operators, I refer to them as our existing community infrastructure and possible entrepreneurs, right?
And experts, people,
and experts for sure.
Expertise. They have work. They have work history. They've shown and proven that this is something that they can be successful at. And I mean, I don't know why it's like ringing in my mind because I guess I've been watching a whole bunch of stuff lately about civil rights and it's just like, am I not a man? Like, are they not people? Are they not people with things to add and value to add to the conversation and really instead of looking at those individuals as members of the black market or members of the illicit market? No, these are, again, people of the legacy market, people who have put in the work and never got credit. Actually, they were criminalized.
Now that sound familiar.
Credit. Yeah.
Happened before. Familiar.
Yes.
Doing the work but not getting the credit. Doing the work but getting left out and left behind.
I'm writing all this down.
Doing the work. But the other thing I'll say, because I was listening to Jason, and talking about the equity is more than, licenses is important. But Boston, Pure Oasis, two brothers, only black men in this business. For miles and miles and miles, okay? Kevin Hart and Kobe Evans. Yeah. And, they were asked the question, well, does this social equity program work? And they're like, well, it does, because we wouldn't be sitting here if it didn't, but equity hinges on other things. And, they had to make them understand, we need wraparound services. Real equity is going to make sure we have access to capital. Real equity is going to make sure we have legal assistance. Real equity is going to make sure we have tax help, right? We don't get in no trouble with the IRS. Real equity is going to make sure we have technical assistance, IT help, right? It's going to make sure that they don't just help us get the license. They don't just help get us in the front door. They help us to stay in business. Because what I found offensive was, Curaleaf and these big companies, right, with all these big bucks will come in and scoop up these little guys. And the next thing you know, they have 100 licenses, and where's the equity? Because it's just like anything we've ever tried to do. That's why I hear, someone white say, well, I chose not to be an employer, and I chose not to be an employee. I just have my own business. I admire that, my brother.
I do.
But you're the exception, not the rule in my community. Because, like Kibra said, we are geniuses. We are natural inventors. Everything and anything that was ever invented. If we want to talk real American history, right? Because I'm not going to even call it Black history. That's American history.
That's American history.
Country was built on. We did that. And we're still birthing the babies that have the capacity. They come here. We teach our kids they got to be twice as good. Come here, like we come here with the goods, okay? So let's make sure that anything we do moving forward in the state of Connecticut is going to be about making the people that have been disenfranchised, marginalized, and criminalized whole. Period.
That's it.
End of story. That's where we're going to start, and that's where we're going to end. That is what we are charging. And there are so many legislators. We have 11 sponsors. I mean, my co-chair, Senator Julie Kushner. I mean, she's from Danbury, and I can't even begin to tell you how she is wrapped all around this, you know. And it is for us as labor chairs, you know, the peace agreement is important, but we want people to understand that they go hand in hand. You know, she gets the equity. You know, she understands it's a partnership. One doesn't happen without the other. You can't have equity, real equity, if they're not livable, sustainable wages. There's benefits and retirement plans, and people are able to get some PTO, and you know they're not a slave to the master, and that they do have an opportunity to have ownership in this business if that's what they choose to do. But we must make sure that the choice is there and the choice is real. We can't call it choice, and then you know they can't get in or they can't afford it.
That's right.
If I could just add, and I got to hop off in a minute. But before I do, I just wanted to jump in. You know, we oftentimes hear from certain political quarters, I guess is right. Mostly my friends on the other side, about how people are leaving Connecticut because it's too expensive. How we have difficulty attracting businesses. No one wants to set up shop here. It's too hard to start up a business. Here we have a perfect opportunity to be at the forefront of a market, of an industry that is growing and will continue to grow. Will be $1 billion industry very shortly. Tying it to a labor neutrality agreement where we know that when workers have an opportunity and a freedom to choose for themselves whether they want to be in a union, that unions have built the middle class in this country, that they are the on-ramps and the pathways, the good paying jobs, people who are going to pay taxes and contribute to our treasury that will then be able to fund all the things we've been fighting for so long, whether it's our schools, our infrastructure, our healthcare, job programs, pipelines, all the things we're talking about. This is a fantastic opportunity. So, you know, the justice piece is critical. The labor neutrality is critical, but really, this is an economic opportunity for the state of Connecticut. You know, if we're going to get serious economic growth, you know, about creating sustainable jobs, unleashing the energy and the know-how of entrepreneurs who just need to have some of these barriers to entry removed and need an opportunity and a second chance to have access to capital and have access and a fair level playing field. We can do this, and it could be great for everyone in Connecticut. And so, you know, I'm happy to support it. I'm happy to work with Representative Porter, and I'm happy to be with all of you here tonight to talk about this really important thing. The struggle continues. The fight goes on.
The fight continues.
That's right. And I got to shout out my vice chair. You know, we've talked about myself and Senator Kushner and Senator Cabrera, but Representative Manny Sanchez is the House Vice Chair for the Labor and Public Employees Committee, and he is also in staunch support of this, as is other members of the committee and other members of the assembly. So, I mean, we just need for you guys to really educate yourself, educate others, and then reach out to your state legislators in both chambers, House and Senate. Reach out to the governor's office, reach out to leadership, and let them know what you think and how you feel about this bill. Because if you want equity, HB 6377 is the real equity bill. And I'm hoping that this bill will drive a conversation that will bring all the players to the table and get us all on one accord so that we can work collectively and collaboratively for real to do what's right for the citizens in the state of Connecticut. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're supposed to be in the building for. This is bigger than me. This is bigger than George. This is bigger than Julie. You know what I'm saying? This is about, it's about something big, and we have an opportunity to do it in a big way. We have an opportunity to set the tone for the rest of the United States, right? To really put forward a landmark piece of legislation that will be the driving force in correcting the wrongs that have been done in this country for centuries. Who would say no to that?
Nobody. Nobody with some good sense.
Sign me up. I'm in.
Sign me up. I mean, again, thank you all for coming and talking with me tonight, because nobody knows these things. You start talking about cannabis. No, because it's so stigmatized. No, we're not doing that.
It's happening, and it's been happening. This stuff been around as long as the earth been here.
Yeah, they'll be sneaking this $1 billion industry into Connecticut, and before you know it, we got 25 billionaires in Connecticut as opposed to 17. And they don't look like anybody on this call. You and me. And they don't look like anybody on this call. So we're not having that this time. We're not allowing you to
We've been here. We've done this before.
Exactly.
Before with the lottery, come on, let's not even go there. So
let's not do it again.
Let's stop nickel and diming people, and let's do what's right. And we're saying to really bring reparations to a population of people that have never been made whole, never been, the right thing has never been done for them. And we're going to allow you to use a tool, right, to reverse the tool that you use to damage them, to actually restore them.
Yeah.
How about that?
This is taxpayers' money. It is taxpayers' money, but it's so much more than that. And for me, taxes is an investment.
Mm-hmm.
It's me paying it forward, saying that I appreciate the community I live in. I appreciate the services that are rendered to me. I appreciate the people that render those services. So here is my way of paying it forward, and not only investing in the community that I live in, but in the state as a whole, in my future, in my children, in education, in healthcare, in all those places where we know there are extreme disparities. This bill will lay the foundation for getting us on a trajectory pathway to prosperity.
Well, I'm so excited again. And so please keep in touch with me so I can put it on all of our 400 pages to let you guys know what we're doing all around the state of Connecticut, because I want this in the past. This one has to pass. And just let me know. And thank you again for your time to take your Sunday evening and come and explain all this to the community. We're gonna make this one happen. We're gonna get a win on HB 6377.
I'll touch and agree on that.
All right. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Pleasure.
Good night. Thank you for having us.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.